this is an account of Murugan's first visit to the ashram, as recorded by David Godman in the second volume of his Power of the Presence, in which he presents it very well. His introduction begins as follows. Murugana, who lived for 80 years from 1893 to 1973, is widely regarded as being one of the foremost devotees of Bhagavan. He was instrumental in getting Bhagavan to compose the verses that comprise the Uladu Narpadu and Upadesa Undiyar, two of Bhagavan's major philosophical poems. And he composed thousands of poems of his own that either praised Bhagavan, recorded his teachings, or expressed gratitude to Bhagavan for having established him in the self. In his earlier life, he was known as C.K. Subramania Iyer, although his parents called him Sambamurti. Before coming to Bhagavan, he was a well-respected Tamil scholar who served on a prestigious committee that compiled the definitive Tamil dictionary. He also worked as a schoolmaster and private tutor. It was a visit by Dandapani Swami, his father-in-law, that prompted him to go to Tiruvannamalai in September 1923. Dandapani Swami showed him the Aksharamanamali, Bhagavan's 108 verses in praise of Arunachala. Murugana immediately recognized that Bhagavan was the guru he had been actively seeking. So he decided to pay a visit to Tiruvannamalai and see him. On the way there, he composed 11 verses in the Arunachalesvara temple. Most of these verses, addressed to Bhagavan as Shiva, contained pleas for grace. Murugana himself has described his first visit and the background that led up to it in two of his poetical compositions. Will I, an unworthy, ignorant one, ever be accepted as a devotee by Lord Shiva, who, as the divine Guru with a wealth of grace, showed clearly to the world the greatness of Manikavachaka? And even if I get such a chance, will I be able to sing the glories of his grace-showering feet, in the same way as in the Tiruvachakam? Like many other thoughts that arose in my mind, this thought, a long time ago, appeared and disappeared like a flash of lightning, manifesting in the sky. Then I heard from devotees who had redeemed themselves by taking as their support the grace of the one at Tiruvannamalai, who is the embodiment of true jnana, and who shines like the flame of true tapas. When they spoke of the greatness of his grace, they melted in joy, and hearing them, I was lost in admiration and unceasing joy. The compassionate Supreme One, who is endowed with jnana, then decided in his heart to be my Lord and Master. There was in me a thirst, an intense longing to subside into the self that was prompted by the thought of the divine feet, which abound in grace. So like one who is suffering from thirst, who comes across a Ganges of cold water on an auspicious day, a golden day for my thirst, I went to Ramana Maharshi with 11 verses that began, leaving Mount Kailash, and so on, and met the excellent sage, the Jnana Guru, the ocean of Mauna, the bestower of Jnana. In the same way that wax melts on encountering a fire, on seeing his feet, my mind dissolved and lost its form. Like a calf finding its mother, my heart melted and rejoiced in his feet. The hairs on my body stood on end. Devotion surged in me like an ocean that has seen the full moon. Through the grace of Chitsakti, my soul was in ecstasy. With an unsteady and quivering voice, I read the 11 verses and placed them at his feet. At that very moment, he graciously looked at me with his lotus eyes. From that day on, the praises given out by my impartial tongue belonged only to him. From the way he bestowed his grace, becoming my Lord and Master, I was completely convinced that he was Shiva himself. As my new owner, he made my I and mine his own. Even if I get submerged in the miry mud of this world, I will not forget the mighty nobility of the bountiful bestower of grace. In September 1923, Bhagavan was still living in a small thatched hut that had been erected over his mother's samadhi. Muruganar felt unsure of the correct way of approaching Bhagavan, so he remained for some time outside the hut. Bhagavan solved the problem by coming outside and saying, "Ina, what?" In Tamil Nadu, this is the standard way of ascertaining what business a new visitor has. In response to this query, Muruganar began to sing the praises that had been composed by him in the temple, but emotion got the better of him. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he was unable to proceed. "Can't you read?" asked Bhagavan. "Give it to me, I shall read it myself." Bhagavan then read out the poem. Until this time, Muruganar had been very particular about annotating his poems with a specific raga or melody, since it was traditional that particular meters or themes had to be sung in a particular way. After this first encounter with Bhagavan, he was never able to sing his poems again. Though he had clearly arrived in a state of intense devotion, this first visit did not go smoothly. B.V. Narasimha Swami interviewed Bhagavan while he was researching his biography, Self-Realization. This is what Muruganar told him in February 1930. Two or three days after my arrival, I was given some medicine. I do not know what it was, but it excited me and overpowered me. I sat in front of the Maharshi and concentrated my mind on his person. After a few minutes, I had a vision of brightness. It was a suffused brightness all over his body and around it. The body was, however, distinct from the surrounding light. How long it lasted, I do not know. So wholly lost was I in contemplating the vision. Kunju Swami, Dandapani Swami, and Arunachala Swami were present while this was going on. Maharshi then appeared to me as Christ, for whatever reason I cannot say, and again as Muhammad, and as other great souls for similarly inexplicable reasons. I lost my former personality during this period, for it was submerged and lost in a huge ocean wave of a new state of spirituality. I was feeling that all my experience was dreamlike, vague, insubstantial, and mysterious, in spite of the feeling that I was still in the waking state. I was obsessed by the fear that my former worldly waking state was being smothered, and my former self plundered of its sense of reality and individuality. I felt that as a consequence, I might be perpetually held down to this strange life in Tiruvannamalai and forever be lost to my mother, who I adored and whose sole support I was. So I bawled out some words to the effect, "Here are a band of robbers called Siddhis, at whose head this Ramana Maharshi is. They are all intent on capturing souls who approach them in the waking state and rapidly charming them into this mysterious Siddha's way of life and adding them to their group. As it would not be within the power of my mother or anyone else to take me back from their iron clutch, I must start off from here at once." I also added, looking at this bright, dazzling figure of Maharshi and addressing him. So here I am, unable even for a few moments to endure this light. How wonderful it is that a woman, your mother, should have carried her in your womb for 9 long months. In this highly strung state, and in this unique strain, I went on haranguing for over an hour, punctuating my remarks by repeated prostrations to Maharshi. After that, I wandered about here and there with Kunju Swami and Arunachala Swami, mostly around Palitirtham and in the Chengam Road until about 3 a.m. I felt that all attempts to escape from the ashram were futile, as the whole of Tiruvannamalai was giving me the same oppressive feeling, submerging my personality. I felt that Tiruvannamalai and the Maharshi were coextensive and synonymous. A few days later, during the same trip to Tiruvannamalai, I had no medicine to excite me. I sat again before the Maharshi and had a similar experience. Once again, the figure of the Maharshi became brilliant, and my sense of personality was again submerged. Again, my fears were aroused that should I continue in his presence for any longer, I would be lost to my mother. So at midnight, I hurried from the ashram into the town and spent the night in the house of one of my pupils. In the succeeding months, I came to visit on many occasions. I used to listen to people's queries as to the Maharshi and his replies to them. I was gradually influenced by him, and my outlook on life was getting altered. After my mother died in 1924, I left my job in July 1926 and came to live in Tiruvannamalai. A few days later, during the same trip to Tiruvannamalai, when I had no medicine to excite me, I again sat before the Maharshi and had a similar experience. Once again, the figure of the Maharshi became brilliant, and my sense of personality was again submerged. Again, my fears were aroused that should I continue any longer in his presence, I would be lost to my mother. So at midnight, I hurried from the ashram to the town and spent the night in the house of one of my pupils. In the succeeding months, I came to visit on many occasions. That's more or less it, but I'd like to conclude by reading a footnote which David Godman adds as follows. I asked Kunju Swami what he remembered of Murugan's first visit. He replied, "We didn't know what the problem was. He was babbling incoherently and seemed very agitated. Bhagavan asked us to keep an eye on him because he didn't look as if he was capable of looking after himself. Bhagavan's darshan did sometimes have a very dramatic effect on new visitors. But we knew that nothing bad could happen to a visitor while he was under Bhagavan's protection, so I wasn't really alarmed by Murugana's behavior. He just needed someone to look after him for a few hours until he calmed down." That's about it. I would just like to add that apart from the most important works, which, as David Godman indicates, Murugana was instrumental in getting out of Bhagavan, as it were, the 40 verses, the Upadesa Saram. The other major work for which we're forever indebted to Murugana is his great and magisterial Guru Vachaka Kovai, which is all of Bhagavan's carefully collected teachings arranged in sections according to their subject matter, and which Sadhuam helped him to prepare. In fact, Sadhuam was largely responsible for the way in which it finally appeared. And Sadhuam also said that of all of Bhagavan's works, The 40 verses, the Upadesa Saram, and the Guru Vachaka Kovai are probably the most important. So there we are. Thank you for listening, if you have been.
Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya Om Arunachala Shivaya 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 அருணகிரி பரமான்மாவின் கிளர்முழப்பு நன்றாய் மரியாத விளங்கும் சித்திரமாயிட்டெல்லாம் செம்மலையே நின்மாலே உத்திதமாய் நின்றே ஒளிங்கிடுமால் நித்தியம் நான் என்று இதயம் நடித்திருவையாலும் தாம் இதயம் என்றிடுவர்தாம் அகமுகமார்ந்த மதமதி தன்னால் அகமில்லான் என்று அகவுருவை நன்கறிந்து முன்னே துணை போல் ஓயுமே அருணாச்சலனே வெளிவிடயம் விட்டு விளங்கும் அருளேசாம் வழியடக்க நிற்கும் மனத்தால் உளவதனில் உன்னை தியானித்து யோகி ஒளி காணும் இடத்தில் ஒப்புவித்த உள்ளத்தால் எப்பொழுதும் உன்னை கண்டு எல்லாம் உருவாய் அந்நியம் நம்பி செய்யும் அன்னோன் அருணாச்சலாவில் வாழ்ந்தேன் அருணகிரி ரமணன் ஆரியத்தில் கண்ட மறையந்த கருத்தே ஆகும் அருணாச்சல பஞ்சகமணியை தன் தமிழ்பாவார் உணர்ந்து அழித்தான் வந்து பரமாத்மன் அறிவாளுடன் முருகால் நல்ல பரநாம் விடுகையாம் அறிவாம் விழித்திரவாம் நிறம் அறிவாய பிள்ளையாம் வாழ்கவான் அருணாச்சலவன் பெயர் வாழ்க அப்பெயர் வாய்த்து பஞ்சகம் வாழ்கவான் மலர்மாகமணன் பதம் வாழ்க அப்பதம் மங்களன்வரே அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலம் 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 Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala. Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala. Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala. Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Ramana Sadguru, Ramana Sadguru, Ramana Sadguru Rayane. 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 Arunachala Shiva, Ramana, Ramana, 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 Arunachala Shiva, Ramana, Ramana. Arunachala Shiva, Ramana, Arunachala Shiva, Ramana, Ramana, Arunachala Shiva, 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 Ramana. Namo Ramanaya, Namo Ramanaya, Namo Ramanaya, Namo 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 Shiva